All right, this conversation is going to be super, super important because this founder is working on a technology that hopes to bring regenerative medicine to the mass public. I loved his tagline on his LinkedIn. It says, making death optional. He's the founder and president of Unchained Bio. Nelson Milla, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for the invitation, Lee. It's a pleasure being here. It's great to be able to discuss all of these generally unpopular ideas with people, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I think that, a lot of people really care about their health and they're thinking of ways of, how to extend their lives. So I'm really looking forward to, diving deep on those topics. But first, tell us a little bit about you and how you got into all of this.
Cool, yeah, for sure. I'm from Honduras. I actually here in Japan, I open talks asking people like, "Do you know about Honduras? Have you heard about Honduras?" I'm lucky if two or three people raise their hands. So Honduras is a very small country in Central America, just a little bit south of Mexico and Guatemala.
Mhm.
And we are coffee producers, basically.
Mhm.
We have a very agricultural economy and we export coffee. That's what we do. And
Mhm.
so growing up, I had already scientific aspirations. I really like technology.
Mhm.
I think that one of the most important pieces of media that impacted my worldview was a Discovery Science documentary that was talking about actually mortality and how to achieve it. And they were like going through different scientists around the world, like each one had like their own approach to the subject. So we were looking at topics like cryogenization, like do you freeze a person and you unfreeze them whenever you have the technology to solve whatever disease they have. You can like create an AI persona of someone, right? So even if I pass away, you can be having this exact same conversation, but I don't really exist, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when I was about 12, my grandmother died of liver cancer. And that was when I made like myself the promise, like, hey, I will cure cancer, right? Like as a kid,
Mhm.
I made that, I was over promising, but I for sure ended up in this path because of that. So I was debating myself before entering college, like, what should I go and study?
Mhm.
And as background, both of my parents are doctors, and they
Okay.
were well. My dad was really excited for me to become a doctor. My mom was the contrary; like she didn't want me to become a doctor,
Mhm.
and so I ended up like, hey, I really want to study the brain
Mhm.
and how it relates to computers. Back then, my idea of immortality was basically, it's really difficult to maintain a whole body functioning, but the important part is the brain. So what happens if we take you're dying, we take your brain out, we connect it to a computer, and so you can still live like through a simulation and you can interact with real people in the real world. So that was like my 17-year-old, like way better than 12-year-old. Like I'm just going to cure cancer. I don't know how, but I'll do it. And so I was like, okay, so we need two fundamental parts, like how to connect the brain to a computer, and a computer that is sophisticated enough in order to simulate reality for a brain, right? Like, and neuroscience is not usually a bachelor's degree, right? Like, it's generally a master's or a PhD. And
Mhm.
so I was faced with the choice of what I'm going to study. It's going to be computer science, computer engineering. I'm going to go all out on the computer part and then I'll figure it out the brain.
Mhm.
Also, as a kid, I had like a very weak stomach, right? So I didn't want to go around touching brains. Anyway,
Mhm.
so I ended up doing that. And like during my computer science semesters, I started going more to hackathons, to startup events, right? Startup community in Honduras is not very well developed. We have a very small consumer market. So it's really difficult for you to release something into the consumer market and for it to catch traction.
Mhm.
I think that during my life, like I crashed around 4 or 5 companies just trying to build a startup in Honduras.
Wow.
Like
Mhm.
from the most naive ideas of, hey, let's do an event aggregator. Facebook beat me to that one. So, well,
Mhm.
around that time, like Facebook events didn't exist.
Mhm.
So that seemed like a great idea, right? Like, let's
Right.
just do an event aggregator. And all the way to like really more like complex ideas like, hey, we have a lot of small businesses that really need liquidity in order to grow. Like, how
Mhm.
can we use the blockchain in order to bring liquidity into these businesses?
Mhm.
But after like crushing that last one, that idea of, hey, let's use like crypto coins in order to make small enterprise in Honduras grow through loans, I kind of surrendered on the idea. It was like, it's just impossible to do something in my country, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so for the next like 3 or 4 years, I was just doing community events for coders.
Mhm.
So all sort of meetups, all sort of pitching events also. And I was working an engineering job. So the idea was like, hey, I'm going to become like really good at coding. I'm going to save up some money and then I'll go to Silicon Valley. In that like way of life, I met an individual called Lawrence Ion,
Mhm.
who's like this guy from Romania that he went all the way to Silicon Valley, started like his own thing around longevity there,
Mhm.
and he was actually coming to Honduras. Right, the story gets crazy. So Honduras, as I said, like a very farmer-oriented place, like not much going on in terms of economic growth. But
Mhm.
just like in the north of Honduras, like there's this Honduran state called the Bay Islands, which used to be a British territory that it
Mhm.
was given to Honduras like maybe 80 years ago, something along those lines.
Mhm.
And so these small islands, they are culturally very different from Honduras mainland, right? Like what do we call Honduras mainland? They are closer, I would say, also in infrastructure. It's like a little Miami in Honduras. And so inside of like that place, they started this very unpopular project that's called SETES, which is a special economic zone for employment and development. Like if you just go into the internet and type Prospera in there, it's going to be a lot of incendiary commentary, right?
Mhm.
And so the idea was like, what happens if we as a government give power to private corporations to handle some aspects of governance, right?
All right.
So the original idea is if you are in Honduras and you decide like, hey, I really don't like how the education system works here, right?
Mhm.
That you could start your own school,
Mhm.
and you could say like, within this school, rules are different. We don't abide by the government mandated curriculum, right?
Mhm.
So we are
Mhm.
going to do our own school. This is going to be the curriculum, whatever, whatever, whatever. And there were like two important pieces. The first one is whoever is doing this, the head of the project needs to be a Honduran person, so it cannot be like a foreigner coming and setting their own rules. And the second rule is that it's not going to be paid by taxpayers, like Honduran taxpayers. Like whoever is putting money into this company needs to sponsor it from their own pocket or through foreign investment. And
Right.
so the idea is like, hey, we can bring investment into the country by allowing private corporations to kind of put their own laws, right? And
Mhm.
so, based on that idea, the folks at Prospera, which became like the most visible project, there are like maybe 3 or 4 special economic zones in Honduras that operate under this model.
Mhm.
But the most popular one is Prospera, which went into the Bay Islands and said, like, hey, we want to sort of democratize access to people to this framework. So the idea is they started a city where you as a company have like more flexible laws in order to do your thing. So for
Mhm.
example, if you open up a mining company inside of Prospera, you can go and say like, I want to operate my company under the laws of Germany, right?
Yeah.
Or under the laws of Japan. And so you
Mhm.
have a small company in Honduras that is operating under Japanese laws. And so if someone comes and sues you for whatever reason, they need to sue you under Japanese laws, right? And so whatever the Japanese said is the correct way of doing things, like that's the way that's going to fly in court, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so these became like a very interesting idea, especially like there's this company that was backed by Founders Fund and a bunch of like other incredible VCs, Sam Altman, that's called Mini Circle. That their whole idea is let's create reversible gene therapy.
Mm,
So this is a special kind of gene therapy that you can opt out of, right? So if you have an adverse effect, it has a kill switch. So
mm,
basically, you take it in the form of an injection. It is supposed to do something inside of your body, depending on which one you take. And then you can decide when to stop, right? Like you just punch yourself an orange injection, and that's the deactivator, and
mm-hmm.
so that makes it stop, right? And it naturally also degrades within the body, like in a couple of years. And so they started their company by testing it out on themselves. Like they are originally from Austin, Texas.
Okay.
And so they started trying it on themselves, seeing what effects they were getting, seeing that there were no side effects. And then they went into Honduras as a way to start monetizing their therapy. They went into the special economic zone, and they started like giving out follistatin gene therapy to people, doing like a phase 1 study that was supposed to be a lot of times cheaper than doing it in the US or Australia, right? So it was like a minimal trial for it. So I meet Lawrence, and he has this idea of like, one of the biggest things that it's holding back medicine right now, it's actually regulation.
Yep.
So the US is really, really slow when it comes to approving therapeutics and approving products. So let's change that. Like, let's find a way to create a company that productizes
Mm,
these, right? And so in that way, I also we created this big event that was supposed to be like a neighborhood within the city of people that are looking into how to progress medicine. So we do this like pop-up city event, which the idea is like you take 200 really smart people in this like specific subject matter. You
mm-hmm.
put them all inside of the same geography, and then you have them like interact with each other, come up with projects together, like come up with research projects together
Mm-hmm.
for 1 or 2 months, and that helps like building momentum towards whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so I actually met like my current co-founder there.
Mm,
Uh, and so we end up hitting a wall. There's a lot of problems when it comes to medicine, right? Like the way that things are done are there for a reason, right? And so just escaping to the Caribbean is a fantastic idea in your mind, but in reality, you face a lot of structural issues. So,
mm-hmm.
for example, if you fly down there and you're going to take this experimental treatment, and you have like a really bad adverse effect, you are still dealing with Honduran hospitals, right?
Mm,
That they don't have like the best equipment, the best personnel, the best way to handle whatever is happening to you. So the reality is that you will need to take a helicopter to evacuate you to Miami, which is
mm-hmm.
like the closest like U.S. state to the Bay Islands,
Mm-hmm.
and get treated there, right? So it means that 2 or 3 hours of flight time,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to increase the probability that you die, actually,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that's one. Number two is like how credible are labs there?
Yeah.
So, for example, for the most scientific aspect of it, if you go and try to see the effects of this specific treatment for example, I don't know, plaque buildup in the brain for
Mm-hmm.
Alzheimer's disease, you
Mm-hmm.
really need a lot of sophisticated equipment. Some of these like biomarkers that people use for Alzheimer's disease in the US are just available through Mayo Clinic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to do those exams in very insufficient clinical infrastructure? And so developing all of this clinical infrastructure, it takes a lot of money, money
Hmm.
that VCs don't want to invest because it's not venture scalable, right? Like they are not getting the returns out of putting money into let's build a hospital for Honduras,
Right.
or let's build a lab that's really good for Honduras, right?
Hmm.
And so we hit this wall and we leave the country. I left my country. I was like a little bit disappointed, like, what should we do next? Like, what is next for me? I was in San Francisco for a while, just doing venture capital work. I was gravitating towards naturally towards biotech deals. And
Hmm.
so I was bringing the firm a lot of like biotech deals, a lot of bio people doing cool stuff. And I ended up like stumbling upon Japan as a
Hmm.
regulation, right? And
Hmm.
Japan is very interesting for a lot of reasons. The first one is that in the collective imagination, Japan is like the country to a Caribbean lawless island. Like people
Hmm.
are like, oh yeah, Japan, they are like too strict, like they have too many processes, like it's impossible to get something done in Japan. Contrast that to the Caribbean island where the criticism is like no one is stopping you from doing whatever, right? Like
Hmm.
you can kill people and you're not accountable. You can scam people and you're not accountable. So it's like complete polar opposites.
Right.
At the same time, Japan has a combination of things. So number one is academic production, right?
Hmm.
So some of the best things when it comes to biotech come from Japan. So for example, Professor Yamanaka, he's a superstar scientist, maybe the biggest superstar scientist in the world when it comes to medicine. It's Japanese. He works for University of Kyoto.
Hmm.
And there is also a series of other discoveries that come from Japan. So Japan
Right.
has a really, really, really strong academic part.
Hmm.
And then you also have really good clinical infrastructure, like on point, right? Like a state of the art, everything, whatever need that you may have, medicine wise, you can find it in Tokyo very easily. And if you are Japanese, also very cheaply through the national healthcare insurance system. But also, they have the biggest problem, right? Like, and I think this is a bit of a cliche at this point. Like, oh, Japan has an aging population, right?
Hmm.
Like, Japanese people are getting older and older and older and older, and there's no young people to replace them, right? Like there's no young workforce that is ready to take the economic blow. Another like non-known factor about Japan is that they also have what they call pharma laws, right? So the U.S. is really bad at putting new products into market. I can tell you the whole story about that later.
Hmm.
But basically, Japan is even worse
Okay.
historically. Like for every like 200, don't quote me on this, but for every 200-ish therapies that go to market in the US, Japan gets like 100,
Mm.
120. So there's like 100 to 80 therapies per 200 therapies that are missing in Japan, right? That
Hmm.
they don't have access here. The interesting thing is that necessity or needs breed regulation, in my opinion, instead of the other way around.
Hmm.
Like you can create the most flexible regulation in the world, and people are still, you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the need, you don't have the market. My contrarian take is that if you have the need, like you can have the most difficult country in the world, the most bureaucratic one, the most slowing one. But in the moment that people know, like, hey, our population is dying, they're going to do something about it, right? Like they are going to jump the gun.
Mm.
And Japan actually did. Japan, since the start of 2016, started like brainstorming, like, hey guys, how do we actually solve this problem, right?
Mm.
Like, how are we going to make sure our population doesn't collapse? How are we going to start bringing medicine inside of the country, right? Like
Mm.
medicine that was discovered in the US or that it was approved first in the US, how are we going to claw it back to Japan? And so they started doing like a little by little experimentations with different like legal frameworks. So they did, for example, a designation that's called Sakigake. And so if you have a really innovative medicine product, you can come and say to the Japanese government, "Hey, Japan, I want to put this product out and I want it to be a Japan first, right? Like
Mm,
I want the Japanese public to be the first one to have access to this. And so the Japanese government, what they give you is a personalized consultant for you that is going to like take your hand towards like the whole approval process in order for you to start selling in Japan. And they started creating other frameworks. So we have the what we call an orphan disease, which is basically a disease that very few people have in the world. They created this designation where if this amount of people that have this disease is very low, you can sell it in Japan. They created also a thing that's called conditional early approval. So it's basically, yeah, this may work, this may not work. We know it's safe. So we are going to let you sell it for the next 5 years. And you are supposed to then do additional studies, right? Like you're going to sell it to the public. You need to start tracking these patients that you're selling it to. And you need to present the government with, like, hey, here are the results from the last 5 years of selling this therapeutic. And that's also like an incredible incentive for therapists to come here to Japan first, right?
mm,
And so Japan has been slowly but surely innovating into how to bring therapeutics into the market.
mhm,
And we believe it's already at a tipping point, right? Like last year, they approved gene therapies under a conditional framework that's easier to get into the country. So we believe that things are about to explode when it comes to medicine coming to Japan, right? So that's the whole background, that's the whole story. That's how I ended up here.
Wow, it's a pretty great story, man. It sounds, like obviously you started off with a problem that you deeply care about, solving cancer, but it evolved into something much more modern and like, actually reachable, I think. And it's very necessary, man. When I think about the US and how expensive things are and how long the FDA takes to approve things, it's crazy. I told you this before when we first met, like my brother had passed away of colon cancer. And there's this technology called CRISPR that he was looking into while he was in the hospital. And there was some clinical trials happening around the country, but he kept applying himself to go to some of them and take part in it. They would help people with stage 4 cancer, right? But for whatever reason, bureaucratically, they just didn't let him in. And maybe there was a long list or something. What sorts of, I guess, medicines and types of things are you looking to speed up the process with? Is CRISPR one of them, and what are some other things that you're looking to help get to market faster?
We are trying to find the most innovative therapies. We are focused on regenerative medicine, right? So, regenerative medicine is everything that has to do with cellular medicine, for example. So, how do you use stem cells in order to better your life
Mhm,
in a variety of ways? We can go into that later.
mhm,
Gene therapies, what they call also exosomes,
mhm,
and a term that's like really popular nowadays that is peptides, right? Like everyone's talking about peptides in Silicon Valley for whatever reason. And so these are the kinds of medicines that we want to start with bringing into Japan. One, because like the academic machinery of Japan is towards biased towards regenerative medicine.
mhm,
Number two, because there's a very big need when it comes to regenerative medicine, right? We are trying to get, for example, the first approval when it comes to gene therapies here in Japan. Like it was
mhm,
just approved last year. No one has actually ever used it. No one has brought a gene therapy into the Japanese market. We are not doing we're not doing gene editing through CRISPR per se.
mhm,
We are working with a company that use a technology that's called plasmids, right? And so what these things do is that they append or attach a small thing to your DNA that does something interesting, right?
mhm,
So they are testing it out with this thing that's called Clodo. So Clodo protein was discovered actually in Japan,
mhm,
and it was linked to, and this is an ongoing joke inside of the medical community, that mice may as well be immortal at this point,
Oh.
because we have tested so many things on them that we know what makes them live longer, right? So protein, what it does is that it boosts cognition and mental health. So they are exploring how protein can basically keep your brain healthier towards like the aging process, right?
Mm.
And so what this company does is that this technology attaches to your DNA and it makes you create, or it makes your body produce naturally more of a specific protein, right?
Okay.
So they did it in the past with something that's called follistatin that weightlifters may have heard about in the past. That this is follistatin is a protein that basically makes your body lose less muscle mass, right?
Mm.
So it's being studied, for example, for patients that need to be in bed for a long period of time. Like, for example, if you get a hip fracture, you need to be in a water bed for months while you're
Yeah.
recovering. So what they are assuming is that if you use this gene therapy on these kinds of patients, when they go into rehabilitation, they're going to have more muscles, so they're going to have an easier time going through rehab than normally, right?
Mm.
We are also exploring stem cell treatments for a variety of things. The Japanese law, depending on how you source stem cells, it's more or less difficult to bring them into the country.
Mhm.
So, for example, if you are using patient-owned cells, so if we are taking cells out of your body and
Mhm.
putting them back in, like cultivating them outside of you, putting them back in, that's
Mhm.
like kind of really safe thing to do. Like the main problem with stem cells is what happens if your immune system doesn't like them, right?
Mm.
Which can bring disease. But if these are your own cells, like the possibility of that happening is really small.
Right.
So just to give you an example of something that's already happening in Japan, that's like independent of our company. These guys at Air and Water Company, which is like a very big company in Japan for natural gas and etc. They're moving into the medical sector, and they developed this treatment where like if you get a cavity
Mhm.
in one of your teeth, you generally need like to drill it and to fill it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So traditionally, fillers are synthetic, right?
Mhm.
So you fill your cavities with synthetic material. What they discovered is that if you take out your wisdom tooth
Yep.
and you extract the pulp, there are
Mhm.
stem cells in that pulp that you can then cultivate outside of your body. And so they created a filling for teeth that it's based on your own wisdom tooth pulp, right?
Wow.
And so instead of it being a synthetic material, it's actually cells. So
Mm.
once you have those cells in there, those cells start naturally creating teeth pulp, right?
Wow.
So you preserve like everything as if your teeth was new, right? And so these are the kinds of things that are possible
Mm.
through self treatments.
Yeah.
We have other friends that we're trying to get into the Japan ecosystem, for example, that they are using animal cells in humans in order to make wounds heal faster.
Okay.
They are focused right now on diabetic wounds. So, for
Mhm.
example, when you have diabetes, generally you need to have your feet amputated because you develop wounds in your feet that are just not closing, right?
Mm.
Like that they remain open. And
Mhm.
so they develop these serum that you put into open wounds that make them actually close, right? Like based on animal cells.
Mm.
So that's like our company we're trying to get into the Japanese market.
Okay.
But the big overarching vision is what our company actually does is that we are actively collecting data, right? Like data is a more important asset. So we offer yes, help bringing all of these amazing treatments into Japan. But ultimately, what we want to do is to number one, prove without a doubt to any government that these treatments work, or what are the exact side effects, what are the trade offs because like this concept of in medicine is that everything has a side effect, right? Like you cannot put something new into your body and then have your body function as it was functioning before.
Right.
So the thing is the trade-off worth it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of medicine gets held back because the trade-off is not worth it, right? Like you're getting a small improvement and then you're getting really wild secondary effects, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that chemotherapy is the perfect example for this. It's really hardcore. My dad had chemo last year, so I lived through that. You like stomach problems, weakness, hair loss. It's just really, 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 really difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the potential trade-off is that it may cure your cancer, right? So medicine says, you know what, like this trade-off is worth it. So we collect data to know exactly the trade-offs that are happening, right? Like to know exactly which secondary effects medicine is having on patients, on which patients and why, and try to come up with why.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing that it's more towards like these longevity goal, towards like these let's live forever kind of philosophy
Mm-hmm.
is endpoint discovery, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so this is one of the most confusing aspects. And as a non-biologist myself, like it took me a while to wrap my head around it. But basically, a lot of longevity science, it's very difficult to prove on a clinical setting because the clinical system is designed to cure disease, right?
Right.
Like not prevent it.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is that generally, when you have a longevity treatment, you have this problem with regulators where you don't know what to tell them you're measuring against, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you have this specific intervention for Alzheimer's, you can go and tell the regulator, like, hey, we're going to give 10 patients this specific medicine and we're going to measure how their Alzheimer's progresses, right? But when the target is something that's more up in the air, like how restored your knees are, is not a real target, right? Like it's not that binary. It's very difficult to quantify how well your knees are right now. And so generally, in order for you to make it to the market as a longevity company, you need to be very mindful of what are you testing on or for, right? For example, you may have a treatment of stem cells that you believe is really good for getting mobility back in, like if you are a person that's on a wheelchair, this specific treatment is going to help you recover mobility in some sort of way. The interesting thing about cell treatments is that they can have widely varying effects, right?
Yep.
So it may be, for example, that you intended this treatment to help with cognition, and the thing in reality was attacking solid tumors, right?
Mm-hmm.
The same type of cell that you were like putting into the patient's body. And
Mm-hmm.
so endpoint discovery is basically like if we are giving this treatment to patients, we can have signals. So signals are like, we have one patient that he was taking this treatment for Alzheimer's, but funnily enough, his knees improved. Like he now can walk. Maybe not because of an injury in the spine, but because like he had a really bad arthritis, right?
Right.
And so this cell treatment that he was taking, instead of like helping him with his Alzheimer, it helped him regain mobility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the kind of things that real world evidence that putting things that we know are safe enough into willing patients can gift us so that we know exactly like this is the correct clinical hypothesis in order to make this treatment go into the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everyone and anyone can access it, and everyone and anyone knows the exact like side effects that one treatment has, right?
So your main customers then, these are these research facilities, these are these companies looking to find areas of the world where they can do this type of testing to bring this type of medicine to market, or who's your main customer? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's her customer. These like really advanced regenerative medicine therapies
Mm,
that want to start selling into patients, that want to start commercializing and collecting this data in order
mm,
to discover endpoints and in order to know the exact side effects of everything that they are putting in the market. And
mm,
again, like one of the common counter arguments to these kind of things is like, oh, you're like doing this without knowing if it's safe, whatever. That's why we are starting with regenerative medicine, and that we think that regenerative medicine is a great way to start.
mm,
Is regenerative medicine is safer than other kinds of treatments.
mm,
So you have less possibilities of dying from
right.
these, and then also like we ensure that there is clinical safety data. Japan is a really solid jurisdiction. Japan is a really responsible jurisdiction, right? So it's not just also it's not a trust me, bro. Like trust me, this works. Let me sell it. But
Mm,
Japan also has a high enough bar towards like they look at your preclinical data. So
mm,
they see whatever lab results you had when testing this with animals or in organoid models or preclinical non-human models.
mm,
And they generally ask you also to test it out in what they call a phase one study. So taking 10 healthy patients, people that are on their primes to
mm.
see what adverse effects it can have on a healthy person. So we come into this with established like baseline of safety,
Mhm.
and what we're trying to do is prove efficacy through actually commercializing with patients.
So on your team, right? Obviously, you guys have a software background mostly, right? Software development and business background. Do you have like advisors on your team that have medical backgrounds? Like, what's the team look like, and how can they, I guess, judge when, for example, a company that's building this medicine is a legit company, for example?
Yeah. So one of our core team members, let's call him a founding employee. He has a background in biology. He has set
Mm,
up like different labs across the U.S. Through a very long time. We also have some advisor that's a PhD in biology in Oxford, and we
mm,
also have like not as formal advisors, but people from the longevity community that want to see this happening, that
mm,
they are willing to provide their input like into different treatments that you are bringing. And also we have another scientific advisor that's just brain related, right? Yeah, building scientific credibility is a very, very, very important part of doing all of this, right? And like
it's
while
huge.
while the while the day-to-day operations, like we personally, we're not touching anything that has to do with patient lives. Like
Mm,
we also work with local Japanese clinics and with local Japanese institutional review boards. So
mm,
we are not the ones that are ultimately judging what goes into people,
mm,
right? But it's a process when you have to sit down with a Japanese doctor and tell them like, hey, here's the portfolio of companies that want to come to Japan. Like we can put you in touch with them with the condition that you let us like collect this data. And so they need to look at your case. They need to look at that company's studies, at what they have done. They need to review that, and then like they tell you like, hey, I'm really interested. Like this seems promising. Like I would be happy to tie the brand of my clinic and my personal name as a doctor into selling this treatment, right? Which
mm.
which which Japanese culture, that's not an easy thing. That's not an
No.
easy sale. That's not an easy sale. So for people at home, they can feel safe. And then the second step is basically this doctor submits these to an institutional review board.
Mm,
Most of them are college related. So these are like college professors that come together to form an independent review board.
mm,
They look at the documentation that you submit, and then they make a decision of, hey, this is great. We're going to submit it to the Ministry of Health and Labor and Welfare in order for you to start selling it next week. Or they can tell you like, you have a compelling argument here, but on the basis of X, Y, and Z, we believe that right now you don't have enough safety data for us to deem it this like safe enough to go into the Japanese public, right?
Mm.
And so then you need to go and do some sort of clinical trial as an entrepreneur, or you need to do some translational study to see, like, for example, if you did these with Australian people, you need to see if it translates well to Japanese people as well, if that makes sense, right?
Yes.
Because
Yep.
wildly
Hmm.
different populations. And so that's the kind of process to get something approved here in Japan,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
so it's not like a trust me, bro. Like
Right.
obviously from our side, it's really important to choose who to work with,
Yep.
especially when it comes up to the possibilities of these companies actually getting approved in Japan, right?
Hmm.
Because we are making a percentage of every patient. If you have
Hmm.
zero patients, then we are not making any money back, right?
Hmm.
So that's why we have our own like scientific advisor. But then it goes through a whole process of clinics and then independent review boards and then the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, right?
So basically, you sit in the middle between those two entities, right? You're mostly like the data collection company. And
Yeah.
how are you collecting the data? Is it mostly through surveys, or is it actually like being involved with each clinical trial? Like, how does that work?
Basically, and here I cannot give you like a very solid answer
Hmm.
because right now we are just having our first client. So we're
Oh.
trying to check out with them like what is the best way
Mm-hmm.
to give them this data.
Mm-hmm.
My vision personally, and this comes back to what we were talking in the beginning, that I had like a crypto startup before this, and I'm a huge advocate of people's freedom over their data.
Yeah.
So in medicine, you have basically two types of data. So you have
Mm-hmm.
clinical data and you have personal identifiable information, right? So personal identifiable information is things like your name, your
Mm-hmm.
email, your phone number, your address, anything that someone can look at and say like, hey, this is Lee,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like this house belongs to Lee. This is Lee. And the important thing about keeping them separate is that people receive bad judgment because of their clinical history, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you there's a lot of discrimination towards people, for example, with HIV, right?
Yeah.
Like people try to push them away. There are insurance companies that will charge you a premium if they know like you have X, Y, and Z and W, and that your granddad had hypertension
Mm-hmm.
and your grandmom was diabetic. They're going to squeeze you out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not blockchain, not in the blockchain, but more cryptography techniques that you are the one that have that data, right? Like that personal identifiable information sits within your device, and
Mm-hmm.
at no point in time we touch the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole value proposition is that you can have this information on your device. You can go to the clinic. Basically, the clinic scans a QR code. Then you go get treated, and the clinic submits their data, and
Mm-hmm.
it's your device giving a signature, like saying like, "Hey, this is accurate. This is not a clinic like making up stuff." And I am a patient with, and what you provide is like anonymized information, like, hey, I'm a male, I am between 20 and 30 years old, this is my ethnicity, this is like the general area where I lived, here's like some predispositions that I have. That is not enough for someone to identify you as a person, as an individual, but that provides meaningful clinical data to the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so these two data sources combine in our server and get pushed into the actual like company dashboard, where the owner of the therapy, the owner of the IP, the company that's actually like developing this technology can go on a daily basis and get like live updates, like this clinic in Ginza treated 20 patients today. Here are like their progress. Like there was some patient that took this treatment like 3 months ago, and you can see like this protein going up in his blood, and you can see like how cortisol has been diminishing over his visits to the clinic, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
they can not just submit this data as supplementary evidence to our regulators. So,
Right.
for example, if they want to go to the US, they have a bunch of data that they didn't pay for, but that they
Mm,
receive money for collecting.
mm,
So they can go to the FDA and provide them with like, hey, we had 1,000 patients in Japan in the past year. Here are their trajectories as time went on.
mhm.
So we believe that this is like really good in order to treat this specific disease. And so here are like the list of adverse effects that every patient reported
Yeah.
or every clinic reported. And so we know like one in every 100 people that are taking this treatment, they are having a headache
Mm,
afterwards, right?
mm,
And that's like the whole value proposition, right? Both for you as a patient, like, hey, your data is yours. You keep your data, and we don't even touch it at any part of the process.
mhm.
And for the therapy itself, or for the company that's providing these stem cell treatment or gene therapy, they have these data packages that then they can use in order to get into the FDA.
So like the patients, they don't have to deal directly with the companies. They deal with the doctors
Yeah,
administering
yeah.
the treatments, right? Okay. Wow, there's like three different stakeholders involved here. Maybe even four if you factor in the government as well. Wow. So many different types.
Yep.
So my question though, you had brought up something about the company in here doing like these trials in Japan and then going to the US, for example, and saying, hey, 1,000 people, right? But what about if the US is suddenly like, oh, we have to do a tangential whatever, study here? Because obviously the cultures are very different. Have you, I guess, how do you plan to combat that? Yeah.
So I don't think that that is something that you need to combat per se.
Mm,
So there's a variety of answers, right? Like the first one is as we grow as a company, we also have the potential to go to other jurisdictions, right?
mm,
So one of the main problems of the United States when it comes to approvals and why it's so slow is that compared to other countries, they're fairly multicultural, right?
mm, mm,
So one of the main criticisms is clinical trials are done only on Caucasian people, right? So recently, FDA guidelines have shifted to, hey, you also need to make sure that this works with Afro Americans, with Latin Americans, and that it
mm,
works with Asian Americans, right?
mm,
You need to make sure that all of these populations are taken into account when you're developing these. So,
mm,
as a secondary value proposition, as we grow as a company, we can go to different jurisdictions and start collecting data like, hey, here's how this specific treatment works with Asian populations. Here's how it works with Afro populations. This is how it works with Latin American populations,
mm,
etc.
mm,
Um, but also, there is a lot of value. There's a big difference when it comes to, hey, the FDA received all of this data. And so you are doing a phase 3 study with 1,000 people instead of 5,000, right?
mm, mm,
Like just getting the number of patients reduced, it's significant because
mm.
every patient, like on average, costs like $120,000 to a clinical trial, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if you're doing a clinical trial in the US, for every single patient, you're paying around $120,000. So if you get it down by 100 people, that's still $1 million that you don't have to pay. If it's a
Right.
thousand people, it's $10 million that you don't have to pay out of pocket now, right? So even if you can like just do a translational study. Like they accept, like, hey, you have been testing this out in Japanese populations for the past 10,000 patients.
Mm,
So we will just ask you to do like this study in order to assess, like, with 100 people
mm,
from more ethno-diverse backgrounds to see how this treatment works across our populations.
mm.
Then that's a significant concession from do a full-blown
Yep.
study and put
Mm-hmm.
down like $500 million, right?
Exactly. But it also push things along. It'll probably give them fuel to maybe even do a study in the US, whereas maybe they would just reject it flat out at the beginning because it's too risky. If it's happening in Japan, it's a more trustworthy market with good infrastructure and, like you said, education here. Maybe they'll push it along further. So that's really promising, man.
Yeah.
I guess what do you think is your biggest roadblock from getting to that scale or that stage?
I think that one of the biggest problems that we have, I think it's twofold. The first one is a lot of money right now in the current fundraising ecosystem. It's going towards AI.
Hmm.
Like everyone is just doing AI, convincing we live in a gray zone between generalist investors and biotech investors. And so generalist investors, they put money into whatever, right? But they don't really understand the pain points of clinical things.
Hmm.
Like they don't understand the impact that you're having, how much things could change, right? A lot of generalist investors don't know that there's a problem with how the medicine works, right? Like
Hmm.
in their minds, like this amount of control is normal, right? Like it's just a status quo of things. It has been this way since 1962. So it seems to work. Being able to talk to generalist investors and convey like, hey, this is a really interesting proposition because X, Y, and Z. It's a very difficult step. And then when it comes to biotech investors, they are generally used to invest only in treatments directly, right? Like they don't fund intermediary infrastructure. They want to fund medicine. They don't want to fund like the enabler play. They don't want to put money into the data flywheel. They want to put money into the treatment itself, right? So it's also that gray zone. It's really difficult to navigate, and this is almost a deep tech play, right? Like we are talking about like, hey, generally a treatment takes 10 years to go to market. In Japan, the timeline is very shrinked. It can take 1 or 2 years to go to market,
Hmm.
which is like significantly faster, but it's still slow when it comes to revenue for a startup, right?
Hmm.
Like they investors want to see you like make money today, like go and make money today. But if it's like, hey, we need a year or so in order to fill all of this paperwork, to have like the clinics on board, because they also need to go and inspect manufacturing facilities. The Japanese government, they suddenly are like, should I put money into you or should I put money like into this high growth app that's happening right now,
Hmm.
right? And so that is one. And the second one is that navigating the Japanese ecosystem has a lot of nuance, right? Like the and I come back to this fuck up that I had with someone at a university. Like he
Hmm.
was a professor, and we come and pitch the idea in order to like establish a partnership, and
Hmm.
he was like really into it. Like he seemed like really pumped, like let's go. And so we were like going down the elevator and he's like, okay, let's go out for drinks. And I'm like, no man, I'm so fucking tired. Like I need to go to sleep. Like I cannot do it today. I
Oh.
cannot. And so that basically killed his emotion for the company, because at the time I didn't know that Japanese people, they need to take you for drinks.
Uh,
You need to go have that beer. Like that's part of the business meeting. That's half of
oh.
the business meeting, right?
Oh. Oh.
So to recover that relationship, it took like 3 months of work, of relationship work, of keeping like flirting with the stakeholder, like, hey, give us another chance, like, hey, let us redeem ourselves, right? So these are the type of transactionality that doesn't get taught. Sorry, like we are used to a different kind of transactionality, right? Like business is business. Like in the US, no one's going to bother if you don't go drinking out with them after a long
Right.
meeting, right? So this also has been very difficult. We have learned a lot along the way. There's mannerisms. There's ways to do things here, and in order to like really move forward, you need to be super on point with those things.
Welcome to Japan, Nelson. Like this is what we deal with on a daily basis here. Wow, but that's incredible, man. Because I actually recently gave up drinking last year. And if somebody were to propose that to me, I'd probably do the same thing, but I actually don't drink. But I think maybe that's why, non-alcoholic stuff is, become super popular now here in Japan. I think it's definitely part of the culture. And if you have the illusion of drinking, maybe it's enough. But Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's unfortunate you ran into that situation.
But you
But
need to go to the Sakaya.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But I heard that you actually got some initial funding, right? You initially got some funding from Antler, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Until I get proven otherwise, I believe I'm the first Honduran founder to get invested by Antler. Asterisk, like I don't know.
Right.
There's very little of us, so I'll say I am until someone comes and hey, dude.
Especially in Japan. That would be
Yeah,
that's
in Japan.
definitely
Yeah,
definitely the
that's
only
definitely one. Yeah.
definitely, definitely, man. Well, that's awesome, man. And you're clearly solving a problem that has huge potential. There are going to be significant challenges with bringing it to market, but if you can push through and get it done, like you're going to say, hopefully, potentially save many, many lives. Let's talk about that aspect. How does that feel to be building, like to go full circle, to build a company that could potentially save hundreds of thousands of lives, you know? I know that the original motivation was for your grandma, right? But like, how
Yeah.
does that feel now to be actually doing something that could save many people's lives?
So it's kind of a motivator, right? Like especially for me, I'm quite a shy person, right? More of the tech guy that sits down and doesn't like go out. And I was like really into Zen Buddhism, and
Mm,
so yeah, like I'm not the kind of guy that out of ego is going to come to a podcast, for
mm,
example. But then like or for example, when it comes to pushing something, a partnership or a person, like I'm really like hands off. Like, okay, like this person is going to come back to me whenever they are ready.
right.
But then you remember, like people are dying, right? And so
Hmm.
all of that like disappears. It's a very powerful motivator, right?
Hmm.
Like I feel tired. I don't really want to go to the office today. But then like the thought of people are dying
Yep.
comes to your mind, and you need to get to wake up, right? And I may be feeling shy, right? Like for example, I need someone to send me a contract in order to move forward. And
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, maybe their legal team is taking their time. Like maybe I should not interrupt them. But then the thought of people are dying come, and it's like, hey, dude, like I need that contract.
That's good.
When are we going to sign? Like I need it. I need it now. Like people are dying, literally, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and at the same time, because of the whole Zen Buddhism thing that I know people can give me crap about, right? When it comes to, oh, you want to be immortal, but oh, you're not supposed to be like detached from mortal things. I believe that also has brought like a sense of calm urgency, to call it that,
Hmm.
where I have the urgency of, hey, let's do things, but at the same time, I am not like anxiously rumbling around or anxiously moving around. I take my time to see things clearly. And I believe at the end of the day, if as a company we manage to help a therapeutic come into the market that's going to add like 2 years of life to people, like if you compound those 2 years of life across 10 million people, you have 20 million added to human consciousness, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So it's also a great math. Like even if we don't make it all the way to we can live indefinitely, or we cure this disease permanently, just the fact that you can add to the life or the quality of life of someone, it's significant, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it's so true because it's just people need to care, right? At the end of
Yeah.
the day, people need to care about others. And this is one of those high impact like startups that could potentially like just help people who are in need. And I wish obviously your technology was around sooner, for some people in my life, but like yeah, man, hopefully it does help people around the world get the medicine they need, especially here in Japan where everyone's getting old and dying and they could have life-saving treatment if it was just available, you know? So that's great, man. I do have a existential philosophical question for you.
Yeah, for sure. Go.
That's like, would you actually want to live forever?
To actually, I believe for me, there's no difference. I think that's the most zen answer I can give you. Of like we're having this conversation, and I'm enjoying having this conversation with you. And I really believe that the fear of dying is not like giving me any extra emotion here, right? Like I'm just
Mhm.
connecting with you as a personally, and
Mhm.
if we were immortal people, I would still be happy talking to you, right?
Mhm.
I would be happy to be on Product Podcast. I would be happy to be engaging with you. And so a lot of like Western philosophy centers around this idea of that is the thing that gives meaning to life, right? But I think that experience itself gives meaning to life, right? Like if I had another 100 years to live, or 1,000 years to live with, my body intact, like being able to move my knees and go about my day, I would entertain myself with something, with someone, talking to people, writing a book,
Mhm.
traveling, taking a trip to Mars or whatever, right? Like,
Mhm.
I believe on the morality of it. Like, obviously, there are people that struggle with their life. There are people that don't want to live forever, and I also think that the important thing is the freedom to choose, right? Like whether you want to live forever or not. But yeah, personally, I wouldn't care
Oh, okay. So,
either way, right?
yeah.
Like I'm just going. I'm just in the world having fun, right? Like
Right. It's an interesting one, man. I recently saw a movie where I believe like they went through that kind of scenario where okay, you are immortal. What does that mean? You actually go through every single like what's it called? Job position. You can do everything. You can have so many relationships. You can meet so many people. You can get married hundreds of thousands of times. But in reality, like what happens afterwards? If you've done everything in the world, every possible experience, what happens afterwards, you know? So that's the kind of thing that's a philosophical question that I think a lot of people may or may not think about when they, ponder that question. But I'll ask a more practical one. There's a lot of talk about, cells, like there's something in our cells that make us age, and like they found, I don't know, something that is the cause of it. Do you actually think that we could reverse aging? Like this guy's Brian Johnson and a couple other people are thinking, do you think we can actually reverse it or no?
that's an interesting question. I think the answer is yes and no. Obviously, like biology is not computer science. That's one of the things that
Right.
took me the longest to find. Like the body's a very, very messy machine. It goes around doing a lot of things. So one of the like what you're describing, it's called telomere, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
so the idea is that your DNA has like these additional blocks of genes that are supposed to be there to protect you from cancer, right?
Hmm.
So you have useful genes. Useful genes are genes that translate into stuff like, hey, here is hair color gene, right?
Hmm.
And so, as your cells like reproduce and they divide, sometimes you're going to have happy little accidents, as Bob
Hmm.
Ross called them, and parts of that DNA are going to be chopped off,
Yeah.
right? And so the biological machine came up with this invention to prevent cancer. That's called a telomere. So
Hmm.
the telomere, part of dumb DNA that's attached to the, let's say, the edges of the DNA.
Hmm.
So in such a way that whenever it cuts, what is going to be cut is a telomere. That's not useful DNA. That's just trash DNA that doesn't translate into anything in the body, right? And so telomere length, what it tells you, like it's more or less how much a cell can divide without destroying itself. But the thing that we need to take into account when it comes to longevity and trying to live a longer time, and this is like one of Aubrey's proposals, which is like the main speak person for the longevity movement, is that aging is multi-causal, right? Like the sole fact that you have like longer telomeres doesn't mean, for example, that your knees are not going to be fucked up, right?
Right. Hmm.
Or that you're not just going to have that herniated disc,
Hmm.
right? Or that
Hmm.
you're going to, one of the difficult questions is how do you prevent Alzheimer's, right? And so, and this comes also like from this book, The Hard Things About Hard Things,
Hmm.
by one of the co-founders of Andreessen Horowitz, Ben Horowitz.
Hmm.
He says there is no magic bullet. I believe that's the same thing for longevity. There's no silver bullet. There's not like, hey, this treatment, this is the injection that makes you live forever. I
Mm,
think that there is like a series of medical advancements that are going to contribute to that.
mm,
Obviously, telomeres is a big one. Like, okay, now your DNA is protected from becoming cancer. Like, you're less likely now to get cancer. But also like a ton of different medications. Like, hey, like we are now reversing. And David Sinclair, one of the most famous Harvard professors that works in this field, is just doing that. Like, hey, here's something that is going to keep your eyes young, right? So this is something that will help you retain sight for a long time, a period of time, right? Here's something that's going to help you with your joints, right?
mm.
So here's something that's going to help you with herniated disc. Hey, here's something that helps you get rid of your brain accumulates quote unquote trash,
Right.
right? So there are proteins that fold incorrectly sometimes, and they tend to accumulate in the brain. And that's
Mm,
one of the likely culprits, or one of the reasons, or one of a potential thing that makes Alzheimer's worse is that brains start like trashing up. So, hey, here's the cell that gets rid of that trash, right?
mm.
So it's not one single thing, it's a series of things, and we need to think about it in a very like step by step basis, in a very like holistic manner. Like, it's the whole body, it's a lot of different machines interacting,
Yeah.
and it's going to take us a lot of treatments to get to a place where we can live comfortably when we're 200 years old, right?
No, and think about it this way, man. Like we have 8 billion people on this planet. It's projected to go up to what, 10 billion in the next couple of years. If everyone were living a lot longer, it would be a very crowded place to be. So I don't know if it's actually worth it to live like super duper long. And then imagine all the old people we'd have. You know what I mean? Like just super old people. I don't know. I think it would be very interesting. Hopefully, we get to extend people's lives. But, a regular life, I think, is good, like 80, 90 years old, maybe 100. For example, my wife's grandma is 101 years old. Here in Japan, people just live longer, you know what I mean? They're about
Yeah,
that
yeah.
here. So, but she struggles. She struggles every day to walk around, get around. When I think about being that age, and another thing, she lost her husband 40 years ago. Can you imagine? And never remarried. So at 60, you lose your husband or wife, and then for 40 years you live on. That's tough. So yeah.
Also, I think it's a matter of health, right? It's
Yeah.
not just like, hey, let's live to 1,000 years old and be like decrepit mummies
Right.
walking
Exactly.
around.
Yes.
It's how long can we extend our life in a way that's useful for us, right?
Right.
One of the most popular arguments that, well, I may not like because it feels cheesy, but it's a valid argument actually. It's like, hey, we as human beings, we stop working at around 60, 70 years old,
Mhm.
and at that point you're just fragile. You cannot play with your grandchildren, right? Like, you cannot run around with them, and you cannot go and
Mhm.
play soccer with them. One of the great arguments is, what if you are retired at 60, 70, 80 years old, and you
Mhm.
have the capacity to play around with your grandchildren? Wouldn't you like to be able to play soccer, go for a run, be healthy, right, until the day that you are going to pass away, right? Like, that's like more of the goal. There's also this very interesting Japanese speaker that talks about longevity, and he talks about like, and this is another like dystopian argument that people make, like, what happens when your life get extended, and then now suddenly you can work again, and so society pushes you back to work. I think two things. The first one, like this Japanese speaker, what he says is like, hey, you need to find something that you really enjoy, especially like if you're 60, 70 years old, you have a little bit of wealth, so that you can go do something that's not like that demanding, or
Right.
that you personally like feel like, oh, this is so boring to do. Like, you can,
Mhm.
for example, one of my retirement plans is, hey, I would really like to have a cafe, right? Like, I'm
Mhm.
doing like all of these high stakes entrepreneurship, and I'm doing like uh, working 14 hours a day, 12 hours a day, you know how it is. I would really like something quieter to do towards the end
Yeah.
of my life.
Yeah.
And I think I would really enjoy that, right?
Hmm.
And the second argument is that I believe that these things don't happen in isolation, right? Like as technology progresses, you need like less and less and less resources in order to produce more, right?
Mm.
Like yes, population is going up. At the same time, food production is going up, right? And as long as we as human beings keep on inventing and keep on researching and keep up developing, we're going to start finding solutions to those problems, right? Like every day, it's just more complex problems that we need to solve. Yeah, I believe in human ingenuity. I believe that we're going to figure it out. I believe that we could be mining asteroids in the next 100 years, that
Yeah.
we will have hyper uh, production farms. I
Hmm.
have a friend that's working like on shrimp farms that
Well,
just yield a lot of shrimps,
oh,
right?
cool. Mm.
So I really believe that as humans, we have the potential to solve a lot of these issues along the way, right?
Well, I sure hope so, man. We're heading to a very uncertain future with AI and everything, and I just hope that, as we progress, we start to figure some stuff out because there's still a lot of things that are uncertain at the moment. And hopefully, with companies like yours, we can figure out advances in medicine to extend people's lives so that they can live fuller, healthier, happier lives with their families and loved ones. Nelson, this has been such a great conversation. To date, it's the longest conversation on the Product Podcast, but it's an important one. And it's
Yeah.
because, medicine, treatments, and everything are being held back by regulations. And if we can find a loophole to figure it out where people can get their treatments, I think it's definitely worth the conversations and worth getting out there to everybody. We do have a closing tradition on the podcast where the last guest left a question for you, and you'll leave a question for the next guest. Are you ready for your
Oh,
question?
yeah, let's go.
All right, man. What was your first epiphany
Hmm. My first epiphany. When it comes to building this company or in general?
in general? It could be life, could be, in the company.
So I think that one of the first epiphanies that I had that was like really significant to my philosophy, my worldview, is that it is not that deep.
Mm,
And this actually came from a friend of mine. Like I was going through a very rough time personally, but I was like making a lot of things up in my own mind. Like I was just anxiously rambling around.
mm,
She sat me down. She looked me like directly into the eyes and she told me, "Dude, it's not that deep. It's not that deep." And for a lot of things in life, I believe it's not that deep, right? Like
mm,
as long as you are happy, you're not making other people miserable. Go ahead,
mm.
do your thing, live your life, right? It's not that deep. So yeah, I think that that was for me my personal like first epiphany. And the second one related to a company, it was Japan, right?
Mm.
Like people say that Japan is so slow, whatever, whatever, whatever. My epiphany was like, yeah, but what if you have this very big problem, right? Like you are forced to either adapt to it or die,
Mm.
basically. So I think that epiphany of, hey, Japan needs to be the next place for medicine was also a really big one. For the question that I want to leave the next
Mm.
person, it's going to be how does the world look like 20 years from now if your company is successful, if your
Okay.
product is successful?
Nice. How does the world look 20 years from now if your product is successful, your company's successful? I like it, man. Good. Yeah. I think all too often we don't, we either get stuck in the past or, maybe in the present, but we don't think about the benefits of the future. We think a lot about what could go wrong, but what could go right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
That's a great,
important.
yeah, it's a great question to ask, man. Well, Nelson, this has been such a fascinating conversation. It's something I deeply care about in terms of you know, treatments and getting people the right treatments at the right time. If anyone else wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
You can find me on Twitter as lower dash Nelson Milla, lower dash or
Okay.
underscore, I think it's the term.
Underscore, yeah, underscore.
Underscore Nelson Milla underscore. So just reach out on Twitter.
Awesome. Awesome, man. I'll link that in the description below. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Lee. It
That's a
was really fun.
wrap for this episode of the Product Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps this channel grow. And if you are a product manager or a startup founder who wants to share your story or some of the struggles that you've gone through in your career, then definitely reach out to us. We'd love to have you on. And until next time, happy building, everyone.